Hi everyone, I'm a senior, majoring in political science and minoring in healthcare studies. And this summer I interned at the Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation in Midtown Manhattan. And I was a project management intern there and got to find out more about my experience and more about the nonprofit sector in general. I have a quick short minute video that just explains how we were founded in 1976.
In 1976, there was a scientist, Dr. Samuel Waxman. 38 years ago, he was given a check for $10,000 to help start something. How far could $10,000 go? What could it do? How could it possibly help? He was just one scientist. What if there were more? What if there were two? That would be twice the work. Four? Well, now we're getting somewhere. What about 200 scientists? What if you had to share your discoveries? Your findings, your science, your breakthroughs. Imagine what could happen. Imagine scientists from all around the world coming together, investigating, collaborating, all with one goal in mind, to eradicate cancer. The Waxman Foundation did just that. They created a new way to share information, to connect our world to help fight cancer. That one check opened doors. It created possibilities. A collaboration between the Waxman Foundation and the Shanghai Institute for Hematology developed minimally toxic drugs for leukemia that resulted in survival rates growing from 25% to 95%, saving tens of thousands of lives. The Waxman Foundation's philosophy is not just about sharing science, but enhancing how science is practiced. The mission of the Foundation is to fund cutting-edge research that identifies and corrects abnormal gene functions that cause cancer. Researchers commit to developing less toxic, cancer-specific therapies in an effort to lessen the debilitating effects of chemotherapy on patients. The Waxman Foundation's Institute Without Walls funds scientists who are leaders in their respective areas of cancer research. Their collaboration brings science rapidly to treatment and has resulted in several drugs being approved by the FDA. There is more to the power of the Waxman Foundation. The money invested in this philanthropic organization goes further than anywhere else. When the foundation
So as you see, the foundation was started in 1976 by Dr. Samuel Waxman, who he used to do oncology work, and now he's just a researcher at the Icahn School of Medicine, Mount Sinai. One of our major partnerships was with the Hematology Institute in Shanghai, and I was one of our main funders, and they increased leukemia survival rate from 25 to 95% success rate. Today, we have raised over $100 million that goes into funding these different collaborative grants. So as you see, we're a big foundation that deals with all this collaborative structure, not just of one investigator, not just of two, but anywhere from up to 30. And I'll go more in depth about the Institute Without Walls later on. So paths to this opportunity, I like to describe how I kind of got involved in the Waxman Foundation over the summer. So on campus, I'm involved in a lot of different organizations, one being Camp CASA, which our mission is to support children through and beyond their parents' cancer by providing a free summer camp and year-long programming. So I've been both a development and event coordinator for them. So I've already done a lot of nonprofit work, and I'm really interested in that, as well as I took a graduate course in understanding the nonprofit sector with my lovely advisor back there. And that inspired me just to get more into the nonprofit arena and my interest in the cross-section of healthcare and philanthropy. So when I heard about the Waxman Foundation, it was just a really amazing opportunity to try something that I already knew, but something a little different at the same time. So this is, as I said, I was a project management intern, which means I wasn't just doing development and event work. I was also working with programming and operations. So I got to do both front and back end, which I wasn't exposed to before. So I got both sides. I guess these are the three events that culminated my entire experience. The first was our annual Scientific Breakthroughs Symposium. And that has to do with all of the research and grants we fund. So we had people from Israel coming who we fund their research. All of the grantees are required to go to that every year. So it's the one way you can see our impact, because I don't know as much of the scientific terminology behind what Waxman does, and it was a great way to see that and see we've done a lot of initiatives with something called triple negative breast cancer. So a lot of the funders for that were there, and it helped me be exposed to a different side, because most of Waxman Foundation is involved in fundraising, and those were the two other events I worked on, which is our 37th annual golf tournament, and that was mostly event logistics and dealing with their raffle. That is our longest standing event, and we raised over $200,000 with about 100 golfers. And so it's interesting to see that crowd versus our 15th annual Hamptons Happening event, which is the week later. If you know anyone like Nicole Miller, who's a fashion designer, she was one of our honorees. So those two events are very different in that the Hamptons is more like just celebrities. It's more like elite versus the golf tournament is more laid back. It's also like double the amount of money raised, up to $450,000 this year with over 300 guests. And there we deal with more donor acknowledgement. We deal with more individuals to corporate donors. So it's just different seeing the different donor levels you could see between the golf tournament and who came to the Hamptons. And I got to deal with, we use Razor's Edge, which is like our donor database platform. So every foundation or nonprofit will use a different system, and that's how we tracked all of our donors. So what I learned, that I also learned in my Understanding the Nonprofit Sector class, is that the nonprofit lifecycle applies differently based off your organization's scope, their size, and their mission. So Waxman is a staff of 6 people, yet we do so much work. So my hands were, like as I said, were put on development and events, but also dealing with programming. So it's good to see, like, I guess since the smallness of our organization, we still have so many connections in different sectors. And as I said, Waxman's fundraising events encompass the majority of their resources. Out of the 6 to 8 staff they have, over 50% is devoted just to like this. We participate in the New York City Marathon and the 2 events this summer. So we have a lot of different events, and that's where the majority of our resources go. Working with private and public partnerships. So we're now working with the National Institute of Health, but we also work with other foundations such as the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, who do similar work to ours. So it's seeing like both of those levels. And as I said, there's different donor levels. Something in golf, you'll notice a lot of people like JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley. Those were like groups like of people who work in the city, like they're going to contribute. Versus the Hamptons, you just tend to see the more individual donors or people who live out there who just want to attend one event over the summer. Because it's like known as like one of the top 10 Hamptons summer events. Not that anyone here cares about that, but it's just something fun. We also have something called, which is dubbed as the Waxman in November, which I want to go back to, but I don't know if I can. It's like one of the like top 10 galas in New York City in the winter too, so really cool. This is the life cycle of nonprofits. So I would say right now we're between like renewal and sustainability. So like we're like kind of at the mature stage because we've been around for over 40 years, but we're now investing more in our programming. So as before we were dealing with, and currently we're dealing with a lot of fundraising events, we're trying to hire more people that are dealing with the programming aspects instead of outsourcing that. So this is like just a way, I guess, like these are good like diagrams to show how every nonprofit, like we were growing like when we started, and now every nonprofit will go through this at one point or the other. It's just really cool graphics. I guess some questions to think about too when you're going through all these stages. Like right now is like a question is how can we ensure sustainability? And I think it's knowing like what an organization's good at, what we're bad at, knowing how to like separate those positives and negatives and move on. Versus like, again, if you're at the beginning, is the stream feasible? You're thinking about Waxman at the beginning. It was started by a $10,000 check. From a factory, like a fashion factory in Lower Manhattan, to think that this one investment would create something. We didn't think that dream would be feasible, but here we are. So it's like, I guess, gauging who your audience is, and that man who donated a $10,000 check was related to the cancer sector in some way. So it's like cool to see how big an organization's resources may seem even when they're starting. So things I noticed, again, we're going on our 44th year, so we're starting a big like 45, 50-year like anniversary campaign, and we're moving towards renewal. So programs and services we're working on right now is the Institute Without Walls, which collaborates with over 30 researchers in North America, Asia, and Europe, and some of them have come to our annual symposium. So that's one of the initiatives we're working on. The Aging and Cancer program is with the National Institute of Aging and the National Institute of Health. Right now, we don't think about how cancer and aging are related, but we're thinking about that more now and thinking how with our aging population, when it comes to Social Security, all of these things, and these are all new programs that have happened in the last 5 years. We've had more fundraising initiatives as well as programming in the last 5. So that has led to like changes in staffing and operations. Like our executive director now is really working on those initiatives. We have a scientific advisory board right now, which oversees all of our programming, and they're an external entity. Some of them work for the University of Florida, one of them works for Dartmouth, one of them works for MIT, and we're trying to incorporate them more into our everyday logistics versus just outsourcing. And hopefully, as we get to be a bigger organization, we can do that. So next steps. This experience led to my interest more in the nonprofit sector, and this semester I'm serving as a TA for Dr. Mays' healthcare studies class, as well as interning at Ronald McDonald House Charities in Richmond, doing what I was doing, but more development and database based. And upon graduation, I'm considering working in either a healthcare foundation or pursuing a master's of public health. So those are two things that I'm pretty passionate about after this. But we'll see what happens. Any questions?